We have several panelists. I think we're going to begin with Jenny Oshiro.
Thank you so much. Do I need to be closer? Okay. Good afternoon to the members of the Sub 5 Budget Committee. My name is Jenny Oshiro. I'm a policy researcher for the Transformative In-Prison Work Group. You'll hear us refer to it as the TPW. It's an honor to address this committee on behalf of the TPW, our 85 organizational members, and their thousands of incarcerated participants. Before we get into the panel, we'd like to take a moment to express our gratitude for this committee's support, curiosity, and openness to hearing from us today. We're especially grateful for the leadership of Chairperson Bonta and the support of Assemblymember Jones Sawyer on the Wright Grant last year. CBOs provide rehabilitative, restorative, and transformative programming in California's prisons that increase public safety and build stronger communities. Community-based approaches to in-prison programming are effective because, as you've heard many times and continues to be true, those that are closest to the problem are closest to the solution. CBOs are directed and run by people with meaningful ties to the criminal legal system, including people who've experienced incarceration, who have returned as credible messengers, facilitating the same programs that help to change their lives while they were incarcerated. Our prison system is designed in a way that tells incarcerated people that they are worthless, that they will never be more than their worst moments. Existing within that system erodes self-esteem, hope, care, and compassion. CBOs fill a crucial gap in the prison system by providing life-affirming programs for incarcerated people. CBO programs vary in delivery, but they all have something in common. They see incarcerated people as past and future neighbors, and they invest wholeheartedly in their transformation. They are built around curriculums that expect incarcerated participants to do the hard work of gaining insight into their behavior, practice accountability, and learn to work and rely on others. It is the combination of care, presence, and investment that facilitates that transformation. I speak to you today on behalf of our members and their incarcerated participants, but I also speak to you today as someone who really needed programming while I was inside and didn't get it. 10 years ago, the chances of my name appearing on agenda associated with the California Assembly were 0. But the chances of my name appearing on the roster down the street at the Sac County Jail were very likely. My life would have looked really different if I had received community care and responsive programming during that time. CBOs, as you'll hear, have wait lists that are often years long. If you get the opportunity to visit a prison and ask any incarcerated person not only what they want, but what they need, they will always tell you community-led programs. However, at this time, CBO programs currently receive less than 0.5% of CDCR's budget. So thank you in advance for your willingness to engage in thoughtful dialogue with us today. I'll pass it to Leonard.
Thank you. Mr. Rubio?
Good afternoon. I'm Leonard Rubio, the Executive Director of the In-Prison Project, a division of 5 Key Schools and Programs. We offer our Victim Offender Education Group, known as VOGUE, at 7 CDCR facilities. The VOGUE program is an 18 to 24-month restorative justice-based, trauma-informed care program focused on developing accountability, integrity, and responsibility. We do this by using cognitive behavioral tools and mindfulness to help our participants develop an in-depth understanding of the causative factors that brought us to the point of committing the harm we did, facing the guilt and shame of our actions, processing our past traumas, and developing greater empathy for those we have harmed by understanding the impact our actions have caused. You may have noticed that I said we and our in my description. That is because I was fortunate to go through the second cohort of VOGUE in 2005. I was asked to co-facilitate the third cohort, and I've been attached to the organization ever since. I'm a former lifer that served over 23 years, starting at the age of 18. Not knowing if or when I would be paroled, let alone leading an organization that helped me or speaking in front of the assembly. I was paroled in 2010 and began advocating for the In-Prison Project. In 2011, I was asked to join their board of directors, and in 2017, was asked to lead the organization. We are currently serving about 150 people, primarily due to the pandemic restrictions and transfers. We typically serve 300 people. We are hoping that by the end of this year, we are back up to that number. Our programs were previously evaluated in 2012 by the National Council on Crime and Delinquency, demonstrating improved emotional control and interpersonal skills. We've received letters from CDCR custody commenting on the improvements they have witnessed on the yards when our programs have been initiated. We are looking for additional funding to cover the costs of further research, to look at quality of life, community impact, and of course recidivism. Some of the challenges we face in offering and expanding our programs tend to be the remote locations of many of the institutions, which makes it hard to find volunteers. In-Site Prison Project has been operating since 1997, primarily on a volunteer facilitator model, which limits our ability to reach even more people and more facilities. My long-term goal is to find additional funding to start paying our facilitators, covering their transportation costs, and to bring back other graduates to continue to spread that hope inside to serve more people and show we can succeed by contributing to our communities and preparing others to safely come home. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Benjamin.
Greetings. My name is Ayla Benjamin, and I'm the Executive Director for Boundless Freedom Project. Boundless Freedom Project provides meditation and mindfulness programs in 7 CDCR facilities with our community members and facilities throughout the state. We also provide reintegration support and programming in county jails as well as in the community. Additionally, Boundless Freedom Project is committed to developing the workforce in California by providing employment opportunities, job training, and skill development for formerly incarcerated individuals. At our organization, we have centered those with direct experiences and have hired former program participants to ensure that the efficacy of our program matches the environment in which we're serving. Due to the involvement of individuals with direct experience, we also have begun to provide individualized support to our program participants as an effort to aid in successful reintegration. Now, meditation and mindfulness may sound like feel-good programs. However, mindfulness and mindfulness-based interventions are actually scientifically backed and heavily researched. They are shown to have an impact on stress reduction, emotional regulation, impulse and anxiety control, enhanced self-awareness, decreased blood pressure, and so much more. Mindfulness interventions are commonly used with behavioral and mental health issues, substance abuse disorders, and in high-stress occupations like with first responders, medical professionals, or in the high-stress environments of carceral systems. Now, while we are really successful in what we do, we still face many barriers to our ability to program, including prolonged lockdowns and transfers of program participants. With this, we see an opportunity to expand credit earning, alternative programming, as well as access to technology for community-based organizations. Boundless Freedom Project and other organizations are part of a RAC pilot program, which is a rehabilitative achievement credit for correspondents. And we have also successfully tested video programming capabilities in maximum security facilities. But our actual access to this technology and reach for alternative programming is limited, not by our choice. Another big issue we face are staff relations and lack of programming culture. On the ground, staff of the prison are not always supportive of program providers or program participants attending programs. Within the department, community-based organizations are often referred to as volunteers, even though, like many of the organizations here, we employ highly skilled and trained professionals to be involved with our programs. We've also had CDCR sergeants, medical staff, lieutenants, say that their staff need mindfulness programs and these skills that our program participants are being exposed to. So we see an opportunity there to expand mindfulness-based interventions to include CDCR staff. I think it's also worth mentioning that we've had more than one former CDCR staff member seek out our organization and programming as beneficiaries as well as facilitators. In addition to those barriers, we also have the incredible challenge of the demand for programming being way too high. And that's in part due to the fact that California prisons are still over 100% capacity. And like all the organizations here today, we've been working to build our capacities and scalability of our programs, yet the demand for programming inside the prisons continues to be hard to reach. We must simultaneously continue to reduce the prison population while investing in community-based organizations. We believe that in-prison programs are better for everyone. They're better for our community, they're better for the facilities, for people working there and living there, and we can't do it without the investment from the state.
Thank you, Ms. Benjamin. Mr. Thomas.
Yes. Good afternoon. My name is Manny Thomas, and I'm the co-executive director of Success Stories. Success Stories, we help produce safer communities by delivering feminist programs to people who have caused harm. Over the course of 13 weeks, our participants will discover what's important to them, honor or recognize whether or not their behavior is supporting what they say is important to them, how to keep their word, to investigate whether or not toxic masculinity and patriarchy is keeping them from being the best version of themselves, develop complex language to express complex emotions, and then become future-based in their thinking. We're currently delivering in 8 prisons, and we can serve up to about 1,000 participants a year if everything goes according to plan. In 2005, I was also sentenced to 32 years to life. At some time during my 16-year incarceration, I accepted the fact that I may never leave prison. I was keenly aware that I had 2 choices at that point. I was either going to live a life of despair, or I was going to give all of myself to encourage positive change in myself or in those around me. Of course, I chose the latter. I discovered many things about myself and how I ended up in prison. I addressed insecurities, traumas, and developed new tools that made me not only more effective in my personal life, but to the community that I was currently in. None of this would have been possible without community-based organizations like ours or the ones that are created by incarcerated individuals themselves. I got to say that this work is deeply important to me because, to be honest, without it, I would not be where I am today. I was not supposed to see the board until 2032. In 2018, because of the work that I was doing inside, Governor Jerry Brown saw fit to commute my sentence. But it was what his office said to me that day that stuck with me the most, and that was, they said that they chose me because they know that I continue to help others. I'm just as dedicated to the work that I do now as I was at that point. There have been some challenges, but thankfully none that we can't solve together and collectively. It's no secret that our safest communities in society are the ones with the most resources, and prisons are no different. I remember being devastated when I couldn't get to specific facilities that had like specific programming, and unfortunately I see that same devastation with our participants today. And it's not that community-based organizations like ours don't want to be everywhere, but the fact is that we just lack the dedicated funding that's a clear investment, not only in us, but our participants who need us. We're dedicated to produce and change the behavior and culture as it is. I would say that the second thing is that we also have an opportunity to improve on access. Right now, there's unnecessary barriers to program delivery, whether it be clearances or space, or actually getting in the way of program providers from becoming brown card holders, so that we don't need additional staff in order to run our programming. We understand that none of us can do this alone, and that folks need opportunity to various programming to have the access to things that are personal, right? Like, every one thing is not good. Education is great, but some folks need more than education. Anger management is great, but some people need more than anger management. Substance abuse is great, but some people need more than substance abuse. And we all understand that collectively, if we give people what they need, they're more likely to be healed and not only come home and produce, more radically involved community members, but also to improve the places they are now, which is prison. Prison are safer when we give folks what they need. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Mr. Hartman?
Thank you. I'm Ken Hartman. I'm the Advocacy Director for the TPW. I served 38 years in the CDCR, and I've been out for a little more than 5 years now. When I was inside, I benefited from some of the programs I now represent, and I was a facilitator for some of those programs too. I too doubt that I'd even be out of prison without what I learned from those programs, let alone living a successful life, let alone sitting here talking to you. It was unimaginable. As you've just heard, I have the privilege of representing some truly amazing organizations who are doing extraordinary work inside the prisons, and they do the toughest, most important work that can occur inside prison. It's the work of healing hearts and spirits. It's the work of helping broken people be put back together. It's the work of deep transformation, restoration, and accountability. I served time on yards that had no quality programs, and I served on yards that had quality programs. There's no doubt in my mind about how powerfully community-based organizations provided programs impact the culture of a prison. The difference is stark. Since I paroled, I visited Norway and Finland multiple times, and I've toured their prisons. People ask me all the time, what's the biggest difference between what they do there and what we do here? And unfortunately, it's not hard to answer. In Norway and Finland, the people held in the prisons are treated like human beings. Unfortunately, that's not always true here. The objection that I often hear from people is that we can't do here what they do there because somehow we're so different than they are. And my answer to that is always the same. Well, all the time that I was there, I only saw human beings in their prisons. And that's what we have in our prisons too, human beings. So there's no reason we can't do just what they're doing. You know, and also in Norway and Finland, all of their rehabilitative programming is done by community-based organizations. They openly admit we don't do it because we don't do a good job at it. Because we know that good programs, what they can do, and from a personal perspective, because I care deeply about the people I left behind, we are committed to doing all that we can to see that every person in the California prison has access to high-quality rehabilitative programs, like the programs you just heard, and many other equally powerful and effective programs within our collective. So on behalf of our 85 community-based organization members who are providing the only real rehabilitative programming inside the CDCR, and the 100,000 people or so who are still in prison that I do care deeply about, I want to thank this committee, Chair Bonta in particular, and your staff, for this opportunity to talk with you all today. The TPW looks forward to continuing this conversation. And lastly, and I would hope this would be in the record so all the rest of the members of this committee can hear it, I'd like to make an open invitation to all of you to please come and see our programs, like Mr. Lackey did. And Mr. Lackey was powerfully impacted and left the folks inside powerfully impacted. He gave a tremendous speech inside that left people in tears. And he said he had not been he couldn't imagine he would be this impacted by seeing what was going on inside. So, and that's it. And thank you so much. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Thank you so much, and thank you for actually recognizing Mr. Lackey and in the work that he's done to just have greater understanding. And I certainly invite all of my colleagues on this committee and on many others to be able to participate in that journey. I just want to first thank the panelists for being here, not only because you traveled many miles to be here, but also because you were willing to actually share your stories. Every single time you share your story, I know that it's a cost to you to have to tap into that experience to be able to build understanding for everybody else. And it's a priceless experience, and I want to thank you for affording this committee that opportunity. I did want to just get a sense of some additional barriers that you all face in terms of programming in prisons. Ms. Thomas and Mr. Benjamin mentioned some of those, but if some of the other panelists could mention some of the barriers to programming that you face.
Thank you so much. I think I can start by just affirming, so much of what Ayla mentioned. Just in number one, the wait lists. We really want to be able to meet the needs of people. Like, it really is a painful experience to know that there are thousands of people who truly want to participate in rehabilitative programming and do not have the opportunity to do so. And just really reaffirm that we hope that the department can continue to invest in CBOs to provide programming in other forms, which, you know, we talked about doing correspondence. We also talked about using technology, and CBOs are really willing to provide, of course, like there's nothing like programming face-to-face, but in instances where there's lockdowns or prisons are extremely remote, like we will take what we can get, and so will incarcerated participants. I would also add that, Manny talked about it a bit. The clearance process can be overly burdensome for programs. You see here so many programs who are stretched incredibly thin, and they're doing the hard work of showing up and going inside and running programs. And so the added labor of having to go through the clearance process, which varies by institution, is extremely burdensome for organizations. Do you want to add?
Yeah, and I would add, I think fundamentally it really is a question of culture. I think that the Department of Corrections, and again, I am not impugning every person who works in the Department of Corrections, and in my 38 years, I met many people who genuinely wanted to make things better. They really did. I think that unfortunately, there's a general culture that is not conducive and welcoming to people coming in and providing programs to folks, and particularly formerly incarcerated people. I mean, this panel, 80% of the people on this panel are formerly incarcerated. 3 of them are executive directors of extremely powerful programs, and we have many other folks just like them. And I think that, when Manny or Ayla or Leonard walk inside to run programs, the fact that they're there and they're telling people, I care about you and I see you as a fellow human being, I cannot begin to tell you how powerful that is to someone inside. I mean, that is, and I think there's a culture change needs to happen that recognizes that and welcomes that and wants people to have that experience, because the fact of the matter is everyone in prison is a human being. And I think that part gets lost a lot of times. I think so there's a deep culture shift needs to happen. Anybody else like to add anything to that?
Yeah, I would just say it's even, so like one of the clearest, there's 2 clear examples that I can use. So like we were already cleared to be in a specific institution. And then as soon as we finished a cohort, which is a 3-month period, our program for 3 months, they sent an email like, oh, well, now we need you to come do the in-person training that you would typically do over the computer in order to get all the modules done. But we want to make sure that we can get all the CBOs to agree on a certain, which is, that's a lot to ask for. And the likelihood of that happening in a timely fashion is not going to happen. Just to turn around and then be like, okay, never mind, you don't have to do it. Or they have really strict guidelines on what you need to do in order to qualify to have a brown card. You need to be at the institution for a certain duration of time. Coming in, once that's being done, you could then ask for your brown card. All of our staff is formerly incarcerated. When we did this at Ironwood in particular, we spent 35 minutes on a Zoom call being asked, why does this person need a brown card? I said, I'm confused. Why am I being asked why my staff needs a brown card? Doesn't he just have to be here 6 months? Does he have to continue the program? Have we met all those needs? Yeah. Well, then why does he need it? And I'm like, it doesn't say that you can ask me questions about why staff needs it once he's completed this. It says once he completed this, then he's able to get those things. When they know, it makes programming easier for you. Because if I have a brown card, then I could then have my participants by myself. You don't have to go find another staff that has to have a particular space. So it opens up even for the facility, right? That's less people that they have to walk hand in hand. So it's just like, that is the culture that he's talking about. Because I guarantee, I'm almost willing to bet that somebody else who doesn't have a background that we have, they're not spending 35 minutes in a Zoom call explaining why their staff needs a brown card.
I'd also like to add that space is a very large issue. Many of the prisons were created well before the R was added and are not set up for programming. So that is a very big issue that we face, as well as the physical spaces that we have access to.
One more issue that does frequently also come up is the SOM system that CDCR uses in order to track and make sure that people are not double dipping as far as credits go. But the way that, with how rudimentary the system is, even when there's not actual barriers between 2 different groups, because they may take place on the same day of the week, but not necessarily the same day and time, the SOM system blocks them from having changes made. One example of that, in one of my cohorts, I have 2 people that want to participate in a new program. They are being told, even though they're only a couple months away from graduating in my program, that they now have to make a choice whether to remain in my program and be able to complete it, or because of COVID, now over 4 years into it, drop the program in order to take this next 16-month program. There should be some way to make adjustments for this.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. I do want to also just give some space to have you all talk about how you measure success for your programs. I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges that we face in terms of our oversight of anything, quite frankly, just implementation success and the opportunity there. So we want to just get a sense of how you know that your programs make a difference, whether you are able to support that with both qualitative and quantitative data that will offer us an opportunity to be able to provide more insight into that, and would just love to hear from 1 or 2 panelists on that.
I'll start, and I really appreciate this question. It's really interesting because, so much of CBO programming is really like heart-centered, delivering the program, but something happens for program providers and incarcerated participants that they see firsthand, right? And if you visit a prison program inside, like you can feel something happening for folks. And because of that, program providers have spent an incredible amount of time dedicated to trying to prove the efficacy of their programs. We understand that, maybe in the 70s, when before the R was added, there was a stigma around like what works in corrections, especially in rehabilitative programming. But that is why we are very intentional about seeking out opportunities to prove that efficacy. We have a wealth of information that we would love to share with the committee around, evidence that programs work. These are empirical studies. Side note, I'm also getting my PhD in criminology, and I study in-prison programs. So I have a little bit of an inside scoop there and be happy to share those resources. But would also say that we collect kind of qualitative responses from folks, both about their specific programs and kind of in focus groups so we can pick up the broader themes. And in addition to that, we have sought out a partnership with Notre Dame Lab for Economic Opportunity. Before I pass to Ayla, who Boundless Freedom Project is actually part of that cohort, we'll be running a randomized control trial, which is the gold standard in research, because programs know that their programs work. And so we're not afraid of engaging with opportunities to prove that. So I'll pass to Ayla so she can share more about it.
Yes, thank you. So in addition to the tons of testimonials we get from individuals who have been through our programs, we're also seeking to participate in legitimate research of our programs. We feel really strongly of our program's efficacy, and we're working with Notre Dame University to prove that. As part of that process, we had to go through a very rigorous vetting process with the University of Notre Dame, and we'll be working with a team of researchers from the university, as well as traveling to the university itself to create the research design. And this project has been supported by the CDCR. And so while not all organizations have participated in this type of research or been able to show the impact of their programs, that's the direction we're heading in. And we're hoping that more and more organizations like Boundless Freedom Project will be able to show just exactly the impact we're having.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I know you probably don't have it in front of you, but our committee analysis, and this is just, I'll share on page 10, we actually have a breakdown of the type of expenditure that's needed for different aspects of supporting folks who are incarcerated. Security is 42.3% of the budget. Administration is 9% of the budget. Facilities, operations, and records is another 9%. Rehabilitation programs that are run by CDCR are 3.4%, and the category of programming where you all are in, programming provided by community-based organizations is 0.07%. So just as a point of comment for you all, I would like to give you the opportunity for each panelist to provide a short response to what else needs to change should we be made to have to improve the impact of programming that you provide.
Oh, I have no problem going first. Changes. So also, and that's I appreciate the questions around research. Those are some of the barriers we're running into too. It was funny. I was on one meeting the week prior that said CDCR was going to make it easier for programs to be able to get research done, and then got denied the following week. So that's one aspect. Again, I think access is important. For my organization, it's not that we have a shortage of coaches. It's that, again, we don't have the dedicated funding in order to get those coaches and then have the ability to get them where they need to be in a timely fashion. There's been at least 2 prisons that I can think of right now where we're cleared to deliver a program where it took over a year to get into. So it's like we already had the agreement, already secured the funding in order to be there. Literally just talking to the prison took a year to get into. And if we're talking about sustainability, that can't be it. Look how many, when we talk about, the value of life, look how many people lost an opportunity to go through meaningful programming in a year. I would also say, again, Kenneth talked about culture change, right? I'm often confused on the acknowledgement of how successful folks know community-based organizations are when we're doing our work with inside prisons, and then we're met with hesitancy or quite frankly, like pushback. I don't understand how someone in control can tell me, oh no, we understand your value, but I'm going to make it as hard as possible for you to do your job. That doesn't make sense to me. And lastly, I would hope that I can just use this as an example. San Quentin is like the beacon of what prison should look like. So much so that prisoners inside don't even consider San Quentin prison because they have access to everything. And my question always has been, if rehabilitation is the actual goal, why doesn't every facility have that? Right? If we're saying that's the goal, why doesn't we should have too much programs, not enough programs, right? Because we're talking about the cost of human lives, both inside while they're there and when folks return home. So I don't get why we have these one-offs, right? Like, why are there, if we have 30-plus institutions, why are there 5 of them that are highlighted as, having a bunch of programs? And again, that's not because there's a shortage of us. As Ken said, he's representing 85 of them. 85. Why don't we have those in all institutions? Folks should be overwhelmed with what's possible for them to get into if they choose to. Not hungering for something that's not even, we don't have the ability to put on their plate. And it's simply because somebody else is going, nah, we don't need it. Nah, we don't need it. So I think that when we're talking about change, it's really that simple. Let's get people what people need in order to be healthy people.
I would add that another thing that could possibly change for community-based organizations, right now the terms of our contracts are at maximum 3 years. Most of them are 2, and so that means every 2 to 3 years, community-based organizations are having to go through a completely new RFP cycle and compete for these grants, while most other contracts through the department are often longer term. And that would be greatly beneficial for community-based organizations to actually spend a significant amount of time in an institution working to shift that culture of programming.
Leonard?
In addition to that, with the RFP process, one of the grants that went out for RFP about a year ago, they had over 200 organizations apply for it. I forget how much money, but it was somewhere.
$55 million in applications for $5 million of grants.
Yeah. So finding that funding to be able to keep the programs going. Programs like mine wanting to move away from the volunteer facilitator model, bringing back some of our graduates to run these programs, being able to pay them a living wage to do that, would allow us the opportunity to expand even further.
Yeah, and I think I come back to just it's a question of culture. I truly believe that, and I think whatever ways that we can do to bring people inside. I mean, I think, you know, I think many times the fences are there. You know, ostensibly the fence is there to keep me in, but I think the fences also keep everybody else out. And like I know you didn't get to hear me say this earlier, Mr. Lackey, but you know, you had a profound impact on the folks who listened to you. There were people with tears in their eyes, you know, and because they were listening to a man in a position of authority, someone who people look up to, saying, "I care about you guys. I'm really proud of you, what you're doing." I mean, that has so much power and impact, and I think if we can, any way we can get the borders to be a little more porous so we can get folks inside, people like you all, other folks in positions of authority and respect in society, to walk inside and say, "We care about you guys. We care about you. You're our fellow human beings." And I think that is just, ultimately, at the end of the day, I think that's the most important thing that can happen. And it's just like, how do we stop dehumanizing people and promote humanity? I mean, I feel like that's the biggest thing. Do you want to say something, Jeannie?
I can just close it really quick, and I'll just say to Assemblymember Lackey, this is the Ken Hartman that all the folks inside were talking about. And so it's amazing to have you both in the same room, especially in this space right now. But other than the specifics and, of course, the culture change that everyone here talked about, I think like one of the barriers we can also address is the visibility. You know, and for that reason, I really thank this committee for hearing us today and really invite all of you inside to witness the power of CBO programs. So thank you.
Thank you. Do my colleagues have questions? Mr. Lackey?
Yeah, I don't really have a question. I just have kind of a comment to make that I find it that this population is very complicated, just like our entire population, but especially this population. And it's often mischaracterized because of the difficult circumstances that are present within the prison system and the lives that many of these people who are serving prison sentences have endured. But one thing that I do believe very, very significantly, that programs themselves are not the real answer. What is the real answer is the genuine quality of that program and who carries it out. It does matter, and I think one of the underutilized tools that I think our system does not recognize are those who have been formerly incarcerated or soon to be released. They have such an impact because they have automatic credibility with that population, and I find that it's an underutilized tool. I think that when I made the visit that we were talking about, I've made many of those visits, and I felt uniquely accepted there, and I couldn't explain it, but I think that there's a stereotype that's unfair of the prison population, and I think that as long as we have genuine outreach, I think it will be received. Maybe not by everyone or even the majority, but the number of people we can reach profoundly impacts people's world. And I think they deserve that, and I hope that we will more utilize those who have been in that system to be role models, to encourage these people that there is life after prison, successful life after prison. Thank you.
Just want to say we couldn't agree with you more. Thank you so much. And we appreciate, you know, you're from law enforcement, and frankly, that's one of the reasons why you're so accepted. You know, and I think that's a really complicated thing, but at some level, that's why it is.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Jones Sawyer?
As someone who's been to Norway with CCPOA and the correction officers and saw how they handle their prison system, which is based on individuals that were in concentration camps during World War II, that they knew how difficult it was to be there, that they made a conscious effort to change the way prison life would be in Norway. And so the leaders of that time, who actually had been incarcerated, then changed Norway. Some people say maybe all politicians should go to jail so they can understand what it's like to be in jail. Afterwards, less than a year after that, the same people I went to Norway with then criticized me for going on that trip after they promised they would be for rehabilitation. They then put a target on my face and went after me. And so I feel your pain when you say it's not really accepted within there. But one of the things I do want to say, what moved the needle from when I got here 10 years ago was ROI, return on investment. It really was about the quantitative value of your programs, not the qualitative programs. You can talk until you're blue in the face. You can show all the different videos of people and how their lives have changed. From what I can see in the last 10 years, what really moved us to Prop 4757, what really moved it was us being able to quantify. Back then, it was like $85,000. So we're talking a while ago, because it's up to $106,000 what it cost to incarcerate someone. And then we compared it to what it would cost to send someone to college. I'm in a doctoral program at USC, so that's a whole lot more money. It's about $65,000 a year. And I would say, and I'm working on public safety, thesis and theory. So you don't have to go all the way to Notre Dame to get that done.
We'd be happy to work with you too.
But what bothered me was on the return on investment when I would ask nonprofits to give me how do you determine return on investments? Something as simple as when people go through your programs, then they get paroled and are out there, how many are successful? I would get, we don't know how we can come up with those numbers. And even before I got in a doctoral program, I said, if they're working, you can go and see what their franchise tax is. Because if they're working, unless they're really into being criminals, working 8 hours a day and then trying to do criminality later, would be highly impossible. And so you can't actually track them. Then I found out we have silos and nobody would talk to one another. But then they started thinking, oh, we can track this. And so I'm going to tell you, if you can convince the public that you can save $100,000, we have, what, 1, 2, 3 people that were formerly incarcerated? 4? That's $400,000 a year we're saving taxpayers. $400,000 a year we save with, what are we putting, with 0.07% of our budget's involved in this. Another 42% is in security. What if we flipped that? How much money we could save taxpayers as far, and the burden, and we don't even think about the societal burden. And so what I would ask is, it's really easy to quantify when people leave, because that's the other thing that's going on right now. I'm chair of public safety, and Ms. Bonta and I are bombarded almost on a daily basis about people who are repeat offenders, and we need to come down hard on them, and we need to, but then you guys come in and say, we're saving lives. People aren't repeating. So we're getting mixed information. We need data. Qualitative stuff is good. I know like I said, I'm in a doctoral program, but the quantitative analysis, if you can get that done, will take us much further along, especially if we can show significant savings by saving lives of people who are inside. And so I know you're going to report back, but for me, the return on investment is the most important thing you can do for this committee, and I would tell you for the state. If you're not able to quantify it, we're going to have a very hard time to convince the public to continue investing in what we're doing right now, and you look up in that 0.07% for a program by a community-based organization may go down instead of go up. And we need to increase that number. Again, I know I'm repeating over and over. The only way we can prove that if you help us help you. Thank you.
I want to thank the panelists and the committee for contributing to this very important conversation. And before we move on to the rest of the agenda, I just wanted to share one thought, which is that some of us believe prison should be a place where people are locked away and not provided with any opportunity or anything they have be considered something other than a privilege. In fact, in our recent committee, we literally heard somebody say, a colleague, the way that you prevent recidivism is by just keeping people locked up longer. And that's the reality that we are faced with here. And that prison should be a place where nothing else happens besides punishment. I appreciate you raising the fact that the R is a new part of the department's work in culture. The reality is that 95% of people who go to prison eventually come home. And the important question is, what do we want that condition to look like? How do we want our people who are reentering our communities to be when they come home? The first three issues that we discussed today in this hearing have to do with family connection, rehabilitative programming, and food and hygiene supplies. Imagine if you could only see your child for 30 minutes a month. I don't have to have you imagine it. This is for our broader. Imagine having a prison job where you are making 8 cents an hour and it takes you 48 hours of labor to buy a box of crackers. Imagine that your family is spending $18,881 over the course of the time that you are incarcerated just for the simple, basic need of being able to communicate. And finally, imagine sitting in a cell for years on end without any programming or connection to the community to help you understand the impact of the decisions that you made, why you made them, and why you can make better ones. Culture shift, as Mr. Hartman stated and Ms. Oshiro talked about, is something we are not able to legislate easily. But the kinds of programs and policies we've discussed today can influence that culture. Less than 1% of our budget has been dedicated to high-quality programs delivered by credible people. Our budget is an expression of our values. And by my count, the state of California has a long way to go before we are actually representing the value of recognizing that people can be rehabilitated, that they deserve to be connected to their families, that they deserve the right and the ability to feel, as Mr. Hartman said, human. So I want to thank you to the panelists for coming this long way, and to our prior panelists who just gave us a good snapshot of both the work and opportunity that we have in our review of our budget this year. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Promise.
We will now be moving on to our next item, issue 4, which is the Joint Commission Accreditation Proposal.